What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here, and are you ready for this? Are we ready for this week? Because we got some interesting energy coming up here. We don't have, there's no aspects that are going to be formed, but we have Saturn that's going to be stationing retrograde. And, it's interesting when we get ready to get into those retrograde points because now we're getting ready to be in a time of review, kind of looking back over some themes that have happened over these last few months here. So we'll get into all that here in a moment. But if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things that I do on this channel is talk about the Celestial News Weekly, the chit chat that goes on up in the sky. And I'm going to be going over the week of July 10th through the 16th of 2025. And let's go ahead and get into this thing here because we got some. The only thing that we're going to be happy that we're going to be talking about here, which appropriately is happening on a Saturn day, the 12th of July. Saturn is going to station retrograde, and this is happening at about 9:08 p.m. and that's going to be Pacific time. And it's happening at, if you see here on the chart here, Saturn, and it's happening at 1 degree and 56 minutes of Aries. Now, when you have a planet, Saturn, stations retrograde once a year, and it's going to be retrograde for the next 137 days from July 12th through the 27th of November 2025. And when you have a, a, a planet stationing retrograde, this is one of those loud points in the retrograde cycle where it's like, all right, this is like a clear where we're stopping here and we're going to go over all of those themes between, because this retrograde is going to happen between 1 degree and 56 minutes of Aries, and Saturn's going to go back to 25 degrees and 9 minutes of Aries. And these points, the direct and the stationing points are particularly loud because Saturn's been at 1 degree for a while. Saturn's been there at least since about June 9th. And it won't clear that degree until and start actually what we're noticing it moving back. It won't be until about mid-August when Saturn finally clears this point here. And so this is usually where a time where there is, again, kind of amplified. The weight of Saturn is maybe really kind of going, you're really kind of coming down on us, or whatever this topic may be in our house here. For example, looking at this chart, if you have a Capricorn rising, Saturn is going to be stationing in your fourth house. So this could be where, and again, if you have any, you're going back between this and Pisces, for this person, maybe, or these people who have this placement, maybe there's some things that are coming up in the family space, whether it be between parents, maybe with siblings, maybe with relatives, maybe this has something to do with friendships, maybe you have something that you want to do in your community here, maybe you're wanting to move, maybe you're wanting to change some things, whatever that might be looking like. That could be whatever, the weight of that may be coming on there. So let's say if you're wanting to expand on your house, for example, that Saturn retrograde may be, those themes of Saturn are going to be more exacerbated. So maybe you go to, things were moving smoothly at first, but then your neighbor, third house themes, decide to have a problem with, maybe they're like, hey, you're coming onto my property and I want to so we got to get someone to get eyes, to talk about this, to make sure that we're not getting into those things and, further delaying the process that you're doing. Because when you think about the themes of Saturn, Saturn is the great, in ancient astrology, it was known as the greater malefic. And so Saturn could deal with themes of like responsibility and the discipline and through hard work and through those sort of like devotion in things. I find that Saturn can give things form, but sometimes it's that the weight of the responsibility that you want to do. Sometimes when we get into those, with anything that we're working towards, if we hit those challenges, sometimes that can lead to a sense of doubt, depression, laziness, or sluggishness. The hindrances tend to maybe undo us in a sense, where we're feeling constricted in some sort of way, or like things are being taken away from us. Saturn helps us kind of push through those hard chapters in life because they all happen, where no one's immune to Saturn stuff. But it's one of those things where Saturn's not just doing these things to necessarily keep us down, because Saturn can produce those who acquire great reputation and, notable rank, and even responsibility over the belongings of others and things along those lines. Saturn can bring some great things, but it's things that, again, that we just have to work at, and it's that life, the great work that Saturn represents, and the weight and the responsibility of, are you achieving those things, and how you're, and so again, I would look at whatever it is, your relationship between the Pisces themes and the Aries themes of your life. See how you're feeling about that. How have you been tending to those themes? Because maybe there's something with here, for example, if you've not been keeping up with themes of the home, maybe there's some bad blood that's going on there. And this is not with everyone, but this is just going to be an example. If there is any sort of like infighting, things along those lines, you're going to want to get an eye on that, because that's going to be a constant, that's coming up here. And I think this is something too to think about. This is where, Saturn, especially for that Pisces theme, this is the last review that Saturn's going to have over that in those degrees of Pisces, and then won't be back here for another 28 to 30 years. So, that's, so you want to make sure that those themes you have locked in, that you're feeling good about that. Going forward, we can't have maybe all the things solved, but you want to have at least a good, make sure that you have all your affairs in order when you're coming to this, especially if you have any planets or points that are around, in between those kind of like early cardinal degrees. So we're talking about Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, or those late mutable degrees. We're talking Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius, because Saturn's going to be working with you more personally. You may be feeling those a bit more actively than others may be feeling, and that's something to think about too. Yes, Saturn retrograde in these between Aries and Pisces is going to have a general theme, but the intensity is going to depend, and what you can do with this and how this is going to be felt is going to be more geared towards your natal chart there. So that's something that, again, I would just make sure to have eyes on that, and know if you got any things around that placement and how those things may be coming up for you. But I don't think that Saturn retrograde just has to be, because again, this is something that we experience once a year. A lot of us have Saturn, even retrograde natally in our charts. So it may be harder to work with the Saturn a bit constructively, but it's not impossible. It just requires more work with Saturn, which you thought, man, I thought I couldn't, you thought Saturn couldn't ask for more. Of course Saturn can, but it's fine. Because one thing that I think is going to be nice about this is that once Saturn retrogrades back into Pisces, at least it'll be in a whole sign aspect with Jupiter again, as opposed to being in this like overcoming square to Jupiter, kind of challenging Jupiter's beneficence a bit. So that can even, create where, maybe at the beginning of this retrograde, it might feel a bit harsher at first. But then again, once we go back into Pisces, maybe this could feel a bit more surmountable, because now even Saturn's relating to Jupiter a bit differently in Pisces, because it was in that year-long square when Jupiter was in Pisces, but now it's going to be in this trine with Jupiter over, once it moves back into Pisces. So, I think that could be a really kind of nice thing to really kind of look forward to there as we get into this. But, overall, I would say with this thing, and I think I'm going to go ahead and switch back over. Overall with this, retrogrades aren't meant to be a time where the world is, where the world is ending or things like that, but it is a time of reflection and of a time of review and analysis, as far as like, okay, where am I feeling good about, again, those Pisces things and closing this stuff up? Are there any sort of loose ends that I need to tie up there? And then thinking about Aries, because what's to come? What is going to be, because now once Saturn settles in there next year, then those are going to be the themes that we're going to be looking at for the next couple of years once that Saturn goes through Aries. And it's going to be one that I think is going to test our patience. It's going to test our mettle, or test our will, because we're going between interesting energies, the weight of water and the weight of fire, behind that, and that, there's still how we deal with that shift. You know what I mean? And so, and I think too, and especially if you have a night chart, this would be one where, again, just like if you need any sort of, like, because again, Saturn can be a bit harder to work with in a night chart. So, that's just something I would just get eyes on and just make sure that you have the type of support that you need and that you got all your ducks in a row. But I think that this will be an interesting, kind of sort of retrograde that's coming on, because then, the following week we'll be talking about Mercury that's going to be stationing retrograde in this, and kind of following that. So then we'll have these two that are kind of going back in this mix. So we're going to be under some interesting energies, this next couple of months here. So. But we got this. we totally got this. Venus is going to be there to save the day for the next one, which we'll get into that here. We'll get into that as we get into next week's stuff. But that's basically all I have to talk about with you there. So, and if you want to kind of look over to see how these transits are affecting your chart more personally, maybe if you are in a Saturn perfection year and that's something you want to work with, see what kind of what transits maybe more to kind of pay attention to over this year, or see any sort of like consultations that I provide, down in the description box there's a link to book a service with them. I'm getting all that stuff updated right now, so that should be all fixed all nice and ready by the end of the week. But if you have any questions about the services that I provide in my consultation, then my email's down there as well, so definitely feel free to reach out to me. And then also, if you want to work with the moon, follow the lunar shenanigans, I recommend us all doing that. It's good to have eyes on that moon. Tune into the cycles of life. But I have on this channel too, in the lunar shenanigans play tab, it talks about the lunar astrology and what aspects the moon is going to be forming, what sign it's in, how the general flavor of the energy is going to be, and how to work with those energies. And then I also have videos talking about different celestial bodies in different signs and different houses. So if you my thoughts on those placements, so that's something you want to check in with. I have all those in playlists for you. So, but until next time, stay mindful out there and keep raising that vibration through the roof. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.